My name is Hailey Carter, I'm 29 years old, and I work as an interior designer in Spokane, Washington. That night started like any other family dinner. The table was set, the smell of roasted chicken drifted through the air, and the low hum of conversation filled the room. My mom was passing mashed potatoes across the table. Mason, my older brother, was making some half-hearted joke about traffic in Seattle, and I was in the middle of laughing about a client who wanted leopard print wallpaper in their dining room. It was normal. It was comfortable. At least, until it wasn't. The crack of my dad's glass slamming against the table silenced everything. The sound sliced through the chatter like a blade. Forks froze midair, Mason blinked in surprise, and my mom's smile faltered. I turned, expecting a scolding about talking with my mouth full or maybe another complaint about my job not being serious enough. But the words that came out of his mouth were something I could never have prepared for. "Hailey, you have 2 days to get your things out," he said, his voice flat, cold, final. My heart skipped. What? He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed like he was delivering a business decision, not dismantling his daughter's life. "This house belongs to Mason now." I stared at him, fork suspended in my hand, my mouth suddenly dry. The house. The home I grew up in. The home I'd spent the last 3 years saving, repairing, fighting for. My chest tightened, and I glanced at my mom, silently begging for some sign that this was a sick joke. But she couldn't meet my eyes. She fiddled with her napkin, twisting it into knots. Mason sat straighter, like he hadn't known this was coming but wasn't exactly shocked either. His lips curved into a smug half-smile, the kind that said, "Of course it's mine. Everything always is." The room tilted. I heard the words, but my mind rebelled against them. I had poured $60,000 into this house. My savings. Every penny I had scraped together while starting my career. I paid off the bank loans when foreclosure was knocking at the door. I replaced the roof when it leaked so badly we had to use pots to catch the rain. I bought the furniture we were sitting on, even the chandelier above us. This house was alive because of me. And yet, in one sharp sentence, my dad handed it over to my brother like I was a tenant being evicted. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. My mom's hands trembled in her lap. Mason cleared his throat but didn't say a word, letting the authority of my father's voice linger. My dad's stare didn't waver. It was decided. Final. Like I was disposable. My stomach turned, and I forced myself to set my fork down. My hands shook, but I didn't let them see it. Arguing here, in this moment, would do nothing. They weren't asking, they were telling. And if I'd learned anything in this family, it was that once my dad had made a decision, his pride wouldn't let him back down. So I nodded. Just one slow, careful nod. Outwardly calm. Inside, though, a storm was ripping me apart. My heart was pounding against my ribs so hard it hurt, my thoughts racing so fast I could barely catch them. How could they? How could my own parents erase everything I'd sacrificed as if it meant nothing? But here's the thing. They thought I would break. That I'd roll over, pack up quietly, and fade away. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. I pushed my plate back, the scrape of porcelain against wood echoing in the silence. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I stood, walked down the hallway, and shut my bedroom door behind me. Only then did I let myself crumble, my hands gripping the edge of the dresser, tears stinging my eyes. But even through the tears, even through the betrayal clawing at my chest, something else burned hotter. Resolve. They underestimated me. They always had. And that was their first mistake. The hours after dinner blurred. I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling I had painted pale blue 3 years ago to brighten up the space. I remembered every brushstroke, how proud I'd been when it dried evenly, how my mom had smiled and said it made the room feel alive again. That ceiling, that room, this entire house, it was mine in every way but name. And now they wanted to rip it from me, hand it over to Mason, the brother who hadn't stepped foot in Spokane in years until recently. The brother who chased big dreams in Seattle, failed at half of them, and always came crawling back with excuses and stories. The golden boy in my parents' eyes. The one they bragged about while I was the one holding everything together. I curled my fists against my sheets. Memories flashed through my mind like cruel reminders, me standing in the bank 3 years ago, signing papers, handing over $60,000 to save the house, me sanding down the floors late at night, me wiring the new flat-screen TV so my mom could watch her cooking shows. Every sacrifice, every detail, every piece of me was etched into this house. And they gave it to him. I couldn't stop replaying my dad's voice. You have 2 days. 2 days to erase my life here, to erase me. But as the night dragged on, my tears dried, and my chest hardened. No. This wasn't going to end with me disappearing. This wasn't going to end with Mason waltzing into the house I'd built, claiming it as his own. By the time the first light of dawn crept across the pale blue ceiling, my decision was made. My parents thought this was over. That their word was law. That I'd obey, like I always had. But they were wrong. The next 48 hours would not break me. They would define me. And when they saw what I was capable of, when they realized the daughter they dismissed was the one holding all the power, they would regret every word. Because this house wasn't just walls and furniture. It was me. My fight. My sacrifice. My future. And I wasn't going down without a war. When you grow up in a house, you don't see it as a set of walls and beams, you see it as the backdrop to your life. For me, this house wasn't just shelter. It was a witness. It watched me take my first steps, cry over my first heartbreak, paint messy art projects at the kitchen table. Every crack in the wall, every creak in the stairs carried echoes of who I used to be. That's why, when the bank notice came 3 years ago, my heart nearly collapsed. I remember the day vividly. I had just finished an exhausting consult with a client who wanted me to design a home office that felt like Tuscany, even though their budget barely covered IKEA. I drove back to Spokane, parked in the gravel driveway, and saw the envelope taped to our front door. My mom stood frozen on the porch, her face pale. My dad was pacing, cursing under his breath. Foreclosure. The words screamed at me in bold black ink. We were behind on payments. The house, the only home I'd ever known, was going to be taken. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say they had a plan. That they'd figure it out. But all I saw was fear. My mom's eyes watered, and my dad muttered something about bad timing, and Mason promised he'd help. But Mason wasn't there. He was off in Seattle chasing another failed startup, too busy to pick up his phone. So it was me. It was always me. That night, I sat at my tiny desk with my laptop open, staring at my bank account. I had been saving since college, every freelance gig, every holiday bonus, every extra dollar I could scrape together. It wasn't much, not compared to the people who bought houses in cash, but it was everything to me. $60,000. My safety net. My future. And I used it to save theirs. The next morning, I marched into the bank, my hands trembling as I slid the check across the counter. The teller looked at me with wide eyes, like she couldn't believe someone my age had that kind of money. I didn't tell her that it was everything I had, that the number in my account would soon dwindle down to barely enough to cover gas and groceries. But when I walked out, clutching the stamped papers that said, "Paid in full," I felt powerful. I had done it. I had saved my family's home. Of course, they didn't see it that way. At first, my parents thanked me. They cried, hugged me, told me they didn't know what they would have done without me. My mom baked me a pie, my dad patted my shoulder in that awkward way he did when he didn't know how to show emotion. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they saw me. But as weeks turned into months, the gratitude faded. My dad started referring to the payment as if it were family money. My mom reminded me that Mason will always come through eventually. And Mason? He didn't even say thank you. He showed up 6 months later, asked if his old room was still his, and acted like nothing had happened. Still, I refused to regret it. Because that house was alive again, and I poured myself into making it better. The repairs started small. A leaky faucet here, a broken lock there. But soon, it became my project, my mission. I spent weekends tearing up the rotting carpet in the living room, inhaling dust until my throat burned. I sanded the wooden floors until my hands blistered, then stained them a warm chestnut that made the room glow in the evening sun. I learned how to rewire light fixtures by watching YouTube tutorials at 2 in the morning. Every paycheck, I put aside just enough for bills and groceries, and the rest went into the house. A new washer and dryer when the old ones gave out. A couch soft enough for my mom to nap on. A chandelier in the dining room, because I wanted them to have something beautiful to gather under. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't buy new clothes unless mine tore. I lived on instant noodles more times than I want to admit. My friends teased me for being a workaholic, for pouring all my energy into a house that technically wasn't mine. But they didn't understand. This house was more than wood and stone. It was proof of who I was. A daughter who stepped up when no one else did. One night, about a year after I paid off the loan, I was kneeling on the living room floor, sealing the wood with varnish. My mom came in, carrying a cup of tea. She set it beside me and said softly, "It looks beautiful, Hailey." I smiled, sweat dripping down my forehead. "It's ours, Mom. We're not going to lose it again." She nodded, but something flickered in her eyes, something that almost looked like guilt. I brushed it off at the time, thinking maybe she just felt bad that I was working so hard. Now, I wonder if she knew even then what my dad would eventually decide. The sacrifices piled up, but so did the pride. When neighbors stopped by, they complimented the new siding. When relatives visited, they marveled at the kitchen backsplash I installed myself. For the first time in years, my parents' friends called the house charming, instead of falling apart. And I thought that meant something. I thought it meant they saw me. That's why, when my dad's words cut through the dining room that night, "This house belongs to Mason now," it felt like a knife straight through my chest. Not just because they were giving it to him, but because it proved the truth I had been too afraid to face. In their eyes, my sacrifices didn't count. I remember lying awake after that dinner, staring at the pale blue ceiling I had painted, replaying everything I had given up. The vacations, the savings, the nights spent scrubbing floors until my knees ached. I thought about the $60,000 that could have been my down payment for a condo of my own. The career opportunities I'd turned down because I couldn't risk moving too far from Spokane. I needed to be close, needed to keep fixing, repairing, saving. And for what? So my dad could hand it all to Mason like it was his birthright. That night, the house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a betrayal. Every wall I'd painted, every piece of furniture I'd bought stared back at me like a cruel reminder. I had built this place up, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, only for it to be ripped from me. But if my parents thought I would just walk away, they didn't know me at all. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After that night, I tried to hold it together. I went to work, met clients, pretended to care about paint swatches and fabric samples. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I walked into the house, it felt like a countdown ticking in my ears. 2 days, 1 day, then gone. I couldn't focus. I couldn't breathe. And then the phone call came. It was Rachel Moore, my best friend since college, now a sharp, no-nonsense attorney. She'd always been my rock, the one person who told me the truth even when it hurt. When I answered, her voice was low, steady, the way it always was when she had bad news. "Hailey, we need to talk. And not at your house. Meet me at Cornerstone Cafe in 30 minutes. My stomach flipped. Rachel wasn't dramatic. If she said it like that, something was wrong. The cafe was buzzing with the morning rush, the smell of espresso clinging to the air. Rachel sat in the back booth, a stack of papers in front of her. When I slid into the seat, she pushed them toward me without a word. I picked up the first page. It was a loan agreement. A $60,000 loan from River Valley Bank. My name printed neatly across the top. My chest tightened. What is this? Rachel's eyes didn't leave mine. A loan. Taken out in your name 6 months ago. Payments delinquent. I shook my head so hard my hair whipped around my face. No. No, I never, Rachel, I never signed this. She flipped to the last page. And there it was. My signature. Or at least, something that looked like it. A shaky version of my name scrawled in black ink. The room tilted. My palms went cold. I could barely breathe as I traced the loops and slants. It was close, too close. But it wasn't mine. I'd signed my name on hundreds of documents, and this wasn't it. They forged it, I whispered. Rachel nodded grimly. That's what I thought. And I think I know who did it. The next hour was a blur of coffee cups and paper shuffling. Rachel explained that she'd been doing some digging after I told her about the dinner. Something about my dad's sudden confidence, the way Mason sat back smug, hadn't sat right with her. So she pulled records. The loan had been deposited into my parents' joint account. Within 2 weeks, $20,000 was transferred to Mason's business account in Seattle. Another $15,000 went toward paying off my dad's credit card. The rest? Withdrawn in cash. They hadn't just taken my house. They'd stolen my name. I sat frozen, the weight of betrayal crushing me. My own family had faked my signature, saddled me with debt, and then had the audacity to tell me to leave. My voice shook. Rachel, this is fraud. This is a crime. Her gaze sharpened. Exactly. And if you're ready to fight, I'll stand with you every step of the way. I wanted to scream. To storm into the house, shove the papers in my parents' faces, demand an explanation. But some part of me, some cold, clear part, knew that wouldn't work. They'd deny it. They'd twist it, gaslight me, maybe even claim I'd forgotten signing. I needed proof. I needed leverage. That night, I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I walked into the house, my heart pounding, every glance at my parents filling me with rage. My mom was in the kitchen chopping onions, humming like nothing was wrong. My dad sat in his recliner, watching the news. Mason sprawled on the couch scrolling his phone. The sight made my skin crawl. I forced my voice to sound casual. Hey, Dad, do you still have those bank documents from a few months ago? I need to check something for taxes. He grunted without looking away from the TV. Bottom drawer in the office. My hands trembled as I pulled open the drawer, rifling through manila folders until I found the one labeled Bank 2025. Inside, receipts, statements, loan paperwork. And there it was, the original copy of the loan agreement. My fake signature stared back at me. I snapped photos with my phone, every page, every transfer record, shoving them back before anyone noticed. My chest was heaving as I slipped into my room, locking the door behind me. For the first time, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was furious. The next morning, I met Rachel again. We spread the photos across the table like puzzle pieces. She studied them with the sharp eye of someone who'd built her career dismantling liars. "This is airtight," she said. "Forgery, fraud, financial abuse. And if we subpoena the bank, we can prove the transfers to Mason. This isn't just a family dispute anymore, Hailey. This is criminal." I pressed my hands to my temples. My world felt upside down. I can't believe they would do this to me. My own parents. My own brother. Rachel leaned forward, her voice firm. "You saved that house. You saved them. And instead of gratitude, they used you. They thought you'd stay quiet. That's how people like them get away with it." I swallowed hard. She was right. All my life, I'd been the peacemaker. The one who fixed things, who kept quiet to avoid fights. But this wasn't something I could plaster over with forgiveness. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd stolen my identity, my future, my freedom. And they expected me to walk away. Not this time. That night, I stood in my room staring at the pale blue ceiling again, the same ceiling I once thought represented safety. Now it felt like a cage. I thought about the little girl who had taken her first steps in this house, the teenager who cried into her pillow after her first heartbreak, the young woman who poured $60,000 into saving it. They didn't care about her. But I did. And I wasn't going to let her down. I picked up my phone, my hand steady now. I texted Rachel, "Let's take them to court." Her reply came seconds later, "Good. It's time they learned who they're dealing with." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about justice. About showing them that I wasn't the disposable daughter they thought I was. And when this was over, the world would know the truth. The decision was made. I wasn't going to wait for lawyers and court dates to remind my family what belonged to me. I wanted them to feel it immediately, to see the cost of underestimating me. So 2 days after discovering the forgery, I made a phone call. "Ethan, it's Hailey. I need a favor." Ethan Brooks had been a friend since high school, now a branch manager at River Valley Bank. He'd already confirmed the shady transfers Rachel uncovered, but this time, I wasn't calling for paperwork. I needed logistics. Someone reliable. Someone with a truck. By noon the next day, a moving crew was parked in our driveway. Not just one van, 2 big box trucks, engines rumbling, ramps ready. The kind of trucks you don't mistake for coincidence. The sound drew the neighborhood out like bees to honey. Curtains twitched. Doors opened. By the time the movers started hauling out the leather couch from the living room, half the block was watching. My mom came running down the front steps, her apron still dusted with flour. "Hailey. What on earth is going on?" I stood in the driveway, arms crossed, voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm taking back what's mine. Every single thing I bought with my money is leaving this house today." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. My dad stormed out next, his face red, fists clenched. "You can't just strip this house bare. This is our home." I turned to him, my jaw tight. "No, Dad. It was my home. Until you handed it to Mason like a birthday present. I paid for the furniture. The appliances. The chandelier. I poured $60,000 into saving this place. You forged my signature for another 60. You don't get to keep what you stole." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Neighbors exchanged looks, whispers sharp as knives. The movers worked quickly, efficient and merciless. They carried out the dining room table I bought from my first bonus check. The washer and dryer I'd saved months for. Even the flat-screen TV I'd splurged on so my mom could watch her cooking shows in high definition. Each piece felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. My brother Mason finally appeared, groggy from sleeping in. He squinted at the trucks, then at me. "Hailey, what the hell are you doing?" I couldn't help but laugh. The audacity. "What does it look like?" "I'm making sure when you move in, you'll have 4 bare walls to brag about." "Congratulations, Mason. You got the house. But you don't get me. And you sure as hell don't get my things." His smugness faltered. For once, he didn't have a comeback. The neighbors began edging closer. Karen Miller, the sweet widow from next door, shook her head in disbelief. "Hailey, honey, you did all this for them?" "Yes," I said, my throat tight. And they pretended like it was nothing. Behind her, Mark Thompson, retired, gruff, never without a baseball cap, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Damn shame. I saw her sanding those floors with my own eyes. Knew she worked like hell on this place. And you just throw her out." He jabbed a finger toward my dad. "You ought to be ashamed." My dad's face darkened, but he stayed silent. For once, the judgment wasn't coming from me, it was from the community he'd lived among for decades. By late afternoon, the house looked gutted. The living room echoed without the rug. The kitchen counter was bare. The dining room was nothing but a dusty outline where the table once stood. I climbed a ladder, unscrewing the chandelier bolt by bolt. My arms ached, but adrenaline kept me steady. When it finally came down, glittering in the sunlight, the crowd let out a small cheer. "Careful with that," Karen called. "It's too beautiful to leave behind." I smiled faintly, lowering it into the box waiting below. My mom tried one last time. She came up behind me as I supervised the final load into the truck. Her voice trembled. "Hailey, sweetheart, don't do this. You'll regret it. We're still your family." I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. For a second, I almost faltered. She looked small, fragile, like the mom who used to braid my hair before school. But then I remembered her silence at that dinner table. The way she twisted her napkin instead of standing up for me. The way she let my father's words fall like an execution. "I begged you to see me," I said softly. "And you looked away. That's what I regret." Her face crumpled, but I didn't let myself soften. The trucks rumbled to life as the sun dipped low. The movers strapped down the last of the furniture, securing it with thick ropes. I signed the invoice, thanked them, and climbed into the driver's seat of my own car. Before pulling out, I rolled down the window and looked at the crowd one last time. "You all saw it," I said, my voice steady. "I gave everything I had to save that house. They betrayed me. This," I gestured to the trucks, "is me taking my life back." The applause startled me. Scattered at first, then swelling as neighbors clapped, nodding, some even calling my name. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Mason stood on the porch, arms crossed, scowling as if the show was over. My dad stared at the ground, jaw tight, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. My mom's eyes brimmed with tears she didn't bother to wipe. It was their house now. 4 walls, empty rooms, hollow silence. As for me, I drove away with 2 trucks full of proof that I had built something. Not just furniture or appliances, but resilience. Independence. They thought throwing me out would break me. Instead, it freed me. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The court date was coming. The forgery would come to light. And when it did, their empire of lies would collapse. But for now, I let the satisfaction settle in my chest as the trucks followed me down the street. I imagined Mason walking into his new home later that night, only to find it barren, stripped of everything he never lifted a finger to earn. That image alone was worth every ounce of pain. The courthouse smelled of old wood and nerves. Every step I took echoed down the marble hallway, my heels clicking against the floor like a drumbeat in my chest. I clutched my folder of evidence so tightly my knuckles turned white. Rachel walked beside me, calm as ever, her dark blazer crisp, her expression unreadable. She'd prepped me for weeks, every question, every counterattack, but nothing could prepare me for facing them. My parents. My brother. The family I once believed would die before betraying me. The courtroom door creaked open, and there they were. My mom in a pale sweater, looking fragile. My dad, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. And Mason, smug as always, tapping his pen against the table like he was bored already. I took my seat across from them, forcing my hands to stay steady. The judge entered, the room rose, and the battle began. The opening statements blurred past, legal jargon swirling around me. But when Rachel stood, her voice cut through like a blade. Your Honor, my client, Hailey Carter, is not only the rightful financial savior of the Carter family home, she is also the victim of fraud and forgery committed by the very people seated across from her. Gasps rippled from the small audience in the gallery, neighbors, curious locals, even Karen and Mark, who had shown up to support me. My father's face flushed crimson. Mason leaned back in his chair, smirking as if Rachel were reciting a bedtime story. But then the evidence came out. Rachel slid the forged loan agreement onto the judge's desk. Here we have a $60,000 loan, taken out under Ms. Carter's name. She never authorized it. She never signed it. And yet, the funds were deposited into her parents' account and funneled into her brother's failing business. The judge adjusted his glasses, studying the signature. Ms. Carter, is this your handwriting? I stood, heart pounding. No, Your Honor. It looks similar, but it's not mine. I can prove it. Rachel gestured to Ethan, who stepped forward as a witness. In his banker's suit, he looked every bit the professional. As branch manager, I reviewed these documents myself. The signature on this loan is inconsistent with Ms. Carter's verified handwriting on file. Furthermore, bank records show the funds were immediately transferred to the defendant's accounts. He pointed to the screen where Rachel had displayed enlarged bank statements. Lines of numbers, arrows, transfers, all damning, all clear. My dad shot up, his voice booming. This is ridiculous. We're family. She must have forgotten signing it. Rachel cut in smoothly. Forgotten, Mr. Carter. Interesting defense. Because we also have handwriting analysis from an independent expert confirming the signature is forged. Would you like me to submit that as well? The judge nodded. Admitted into evidence. My father sat down hard, his bluster deflating. Mason finally leaned forward, his smirk slipping. Look, maybe there was a misunderstanding. We all use the same paperwork sometimes, maybe Hailey said it was fine. My stomach twisted. The lies poured out so easily. I forced myself to speak, my voice steady. No, Mason. I never agreed to this. You stole from me. You all did. The cross-examination was brutal. Rachel dismantled every excuse, every half-truth. She pressed my parents on where the cash went. She grilled Mason about his so-called business expenses. With every question, their story unraveled, threads snapping until nothing was left but silence. At one point, Rachel asked, Mr. Carter, do you love your daughter? My dad hesitated, his lips pressed tight. Of course I do. Then why, Rachel said sharply, did you knowingly allow a fraudulent loan in her name, jeopardizing her financial future for the benefit of your son? The courtroom went dead quiet. My dad had no answer. My mom stared at her lap, tears dripping onto her sweater. When it was my turn to testify, I thought I'd fall apart. But the moment I looked at the judge, something inside me steadied. I told him about the foreclosure notice, the $60,000 I sacrificed to save the house. About the night sanding floors, rewiring lights, eating instant noodles so I could buy a new washer. About the moment my father told me to leave, handing the house to Mason like I was disposable. By the time I finished, my voice cracked, but I didn't cry. I stood tall. This isn't just about money, I said. It's about betrayal. They took everything I gave and used it against me. And I refused to let them erase me. The gallery stirred, whispers, nods. The judge's eyes softened just slightly. After hours of testimony, the judge finally spoke. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the loan in question was fraudulently obtained. The funds were misappropriated, and Ms. Carter is not liable for repayment. Furthermore, restitution will be sought from the defendants. My breath caught. Did I hear that right? The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Carter. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then it hit me, I'd won. The fraudulent loan was gone. The debt lifted. Their scheme exposed. The aftermath was chaos. My father shouted, my mother sobbed, Mason stormed out with curses under his breath. But none of it mattered. Because I had stood up in front of the world and told the truth. And the truth had saved me. Karen squeezed my hand as I left the courthouse. You were incredible, Hailey. Brave. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as the forgotten daughter, not as the fixer, but as someone who fought, and won. That night, I sat in my bare apartment surrounded by the furniture I had taken back, the chandelier resting in its box beside me. The silence felt different now. Not hollow. Not heavy. Free. I thought about my family in that empty house, stripped of everything they thought they could steal. For once, the emptiness wasn't mine. It was theirs. And as much as it hurt, as much as the betrayal still burned, I knew I'd never let them break me again. This wasn't just survival. This was rebirth. The weeks after the trial felt surreal. I had walked into that courtroom carrying years of pain and walked out lighter, though the scars still lingered. The fraudulent loan was gone, the truth was exposed, and for the first time in a long time, the weight wasn't mine to carry. Still, the silence that followed was strange. No phone calls from my parents. No texts from Mason. No awkward attempts at reconciliation. Just, nothing. At first, it stung. There was a part of me, maybe the little girl inside, that still longed for my mom's voice, for my dad's approval, for my brother to look at me without that smug superiority. But then I remembered, I had begged for their love for years. I had bled for it, starved for it, given everything I had. And all they gave me in return was betrayal. So I stopped waiting. I threw myself into my work. My clients noticed something different in me. Stronger. Clearer. My designs became bolder, sharper, infused with a confidence I hadn't felt before. One client told me, "You don't just decorate houses, Hailey. You transform them. You make them feel alive." And I realized, that's what I had been doing all along. I had made my parents' house feel alive. But now, it was time to build a life that belonged to me. With the money I reclaimed and the loan erased, I applied for a mortgage under my own name. No hidden hands, no forged signatures. Just me. When I signed the papers for a small craftsman bungalow on the edge of Spokane, my hands shook, not from fear, but from pride. The keys felt heavy in my palm, solid, real. This wasn't a house I saved for someone else. This was mine. Every brick, every board, every corner. Moving in was bittersweet. The trucks rolled up, filled with the furniture I'd pulled from my parents' home. As each piece settled into its new place, I felt like I was reclaiming not just things, but memories. The leather couch where I'd once watched TV with my mom became the centerpiece of my living room. The chandelier I'd unscrewed bolt by bolt glistened above my new dining table. But here, they weren't reminders of betrayal. They were symbols of resilience. Proof that I could take back what was mine and make it beautiful again. The first night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, this one plain white, unpainted, waiting for my touch. And for the first time in years, I felt safe. Not because I was under my parents' roof, but because I had built this sanctuary myself. Word of the trial spread through the neighborhood. Karen and Mark visited often, bringing homemade cookies or a new tool for my toolbox. They called me the strongest girl on the block. Sometimes, when we sat on my porch sipping iced tea, Karen would shake her head. "I don't know how you did it, Hailey. Most people would have crumbled." I smiled, though the truth was heavier. I almost did. But then I realized, if I broke, they'd win. And I wasn't about to let that happen. Of course, not everything healed overnight. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd ever hear from my mom again. Days when I saw families laughing together at the park and felt a pang of loss. But healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about learning to live with it, and refusing to let it define you. Rachel reminded me of that often. One evening over wine, she said, "You know, Hailey, some people think family is everything. But the truth? Family is only as strong as the love and respect that holds it together. Without that, blood means nothing." I nodded, letting the words sink deep. Because that was the lesson I had learned the hardest way possible. You can't choose the family you're born into, but you can choose the family you build around you. Months later, I stood in my own backyard, paint-stained jeans clinging to my legs, a brush in my hand. I was finishing the fence, something my old house had needed for years but never got. As I painted, the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the fresh boards. I paused, leaning on the brush, and let myself breathe. This was my life now. Not perfect, not free of scars, but mine. The girl who once emptied her savings to save her family's home had finally learned to save herself. If you asked me today whether I regret it, paying the $60,000, pouring my soul into that house, even enduring the betrayal, I'd say no. Because every step, every sacrifice, every heartbreak led me here. To strength. To independence. To the knowledge that I am enough. And if my parents and Mason ever drive past this little bungalow, if they ever see the lights glowing through the windows, I hope they understand. They didn't break me. They built me. Sometimes, at night, I still think about that dining room table, about the moment my dad's glass slammed against the wood and shattered my world with 8 words, "This house belongs to Mason now." And then I smile. Because those words didn't end me. They started me. This isn't just a new chapter. This is my story now.